The first-class cabin of Continental Airlines Flight 447 exuded the characteristic aroma of expensive leather and imported perfumes. Rachel Morgan settled into seat 2A, her body finally relaxing after weeks of tension. At 28, she carried on her shoulders the weight of 5 years serving as a Navy SEAL, one of the few women to achieve this elite position in the American Armed Forces. Her last mission in Syria had been particularly brutal, and this flight from San Diego to New York represented her first trip as a civilian in months. She wore faded jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and worn-out sneakers. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy bun, and deep dark circles marked her face. Rachel didn't care about appearances at that moment. All she wanted was to get home, hug her mother, and try to rebuild some semblance of normal life far from the war zones. As Rachel adjusted her seatbelt, she noticed the disdainful glances from the other first-class passengers. A man in an Armani suit sitting across from her wrinkled his nose as if she carried the smell of something unpleasant. A woman covered in jewels whispered something to her husband, and they both chuckled quietly as they watched her. Rachel was used to it. For years, she had faced skepticism and disdain, first from male colleagues who doubted her physical capabilities, then from superiors who questioned her emotional commitment. She had proven them all wrong, one mission at a time, until she earned the respect she deserved. But here, among civilians who would never hold a weapon or sleep in the frozen desert, she was just a poorly dressed young woman occupying a seat she clearly couldn't afford. The flight attendant, a middle-aged blonde woman named Patricia, approached with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am, but could you show me your boarding pass?" Her tone was polite, but there was a clear innuendo behind her words. Rachel handed over the card without saying anything. Her fingers still trembled slightly, a lingering side effect of the last few weeks in combat. Patricia examined the document with exaggerated attention, turning it over several times as if searching for evidence of forgery. Patricia murmured, her expression growing increasingly suspicious. "Was this seat an upgrade?" "No," Rachel replied calmly. "I paid for the ticket." That was true. Rachel had used almost all of her savings for that first-class flight. After 5 years sleeping in military camps, eating rations, and living with the bare minimum, she had decided to treat herself to this one luxury. Her body was broken, her mind exhausted. She deserved those few hours of comfort. Patricia exchanged glances with another flight attendant, a younger woman named Jennifer. Both seemed skeptical. "I'll need to check that with our system," Patricia said, her tone now openly hostile. "Please wait here." As Patricia walked away toward the crew cabin, Rachel felt all eyes in first class fixed on her. The man in the Armani suit shook his head disapprovingly. "Unbelievable," he muttered loudly enough for her to hear. "Anyone can get into first class these days." Rachel clenched her fists, but kept a neutral expression. She had faced terrorists armed with explosives, had crawled through minefields, had carried wounded comrades for miles under enemy fire. She wouldn't be intimidated by arrogant people on a plane. Patricia returned minutes later, accompanied by the flight supervisor, a burly man named Richard. He looked at Rachel with an expression that mixed irritation and superiority. "Ma'am, there seems to be a problem with your seat," he announced loudly, making sure everyone in the cabin could hear. "We need to move you to economy class." Rachel felt her blood boil. "Is there something wrong with my ticket?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "The system is showing an inconsistency," Richard replied vaguely. "For safety reasons, we need you to move to another seat." "What inconsistency?" Rachel insisted. "My ticket is valid. I paid full price for this seat." Richard crossed his arms, his posture becoming defensive. "Madam, I'm not going to discuss this here. Either you move voluntarily, or we'll have to call airport security." The other passengers watched the confrontation with morbid interest. Some seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but no one said anything. The woman covered in jewels whispered again to her husband. She probably stole someone's credit card. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to control the anger boiling inside her. Part of her wanted to stand up and show them exactly who she was, reveal the scars covering her body, tell them about the medals kept in her suitcase. But another part, the part that had been trained to maintain control under extreme pressure, knew it wouldn't do any good. These people had already decided who she was, based solely on her appearance. "Very well," Rachel said finally, unbuckling her belt. "But I want it on record that I am being discriminated against without valid reason." Richard nodded dismissively. "You are free to file a complaint after the flight, ma'am. For now, Please collect your belongings and follow me." Rachel grabbed her small backpack from the overhead compartment. It was all she had, besides the clothes she was wearing and a checked bag containing her military uniforms, some souvenirs, and her honorable discharge papers. As she followed Richard down the aisle toward the curtain separating first class from economy, Rachel could hear sighs of relief behind her. Economy class was crowded and noisy, a stark contrast to the quiet, refined atmosphere it had just left behind. Richard pointed to a middle seat in the last row, squeezed between an obese man spilling onto the seat next to him and a woman with a small child in her lap. "Here it is," he said casually. Rachel stowed her backpack and squeezed into the cramped seat. The child next to her was crying, and the man across from her was snoring loudly even before takeoff. She closed her eyes, trying to block it all out. The noise, the humiliation, the sheer injustice of what had just happened. But as the plane taxied toward the runway, Rachel felt a sharp pain in her back, where one of the tattoos covering her scars was located. It was the Navy SEAL emblem, an eagle holding a trident, an anchor, and a pistol, tattooed just above her lower back. She had gotten that tattoo after her first successful mission, a way to permanently mark her achievement and honor the sacrifice that position demanded. At that moment, in the uncomfortable seat of economy class, surrounded by people who treated her like an intruder, Rachel allowed herself to feel all the anger and frustration she had been suppressing. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. SEALs didn't cry over petty humiliations. They moved on. Always. The plane accelerated down the runway and took off smoothly, soaring through the clouds above San Diego. Rachel looked out the small window beside her, watching the city shrink below. Somewhere down there was the naval base where she had spent the last 5 years, where she had shed blood, sweat, and tears to prove she deserved to be there. And now, returning home, she was being treated like trash by people who would never understand what she had sacrificed for their country. 20 minutes after takeoff, as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Patricia and Jennifer began serving drinks. Rachel watched through the half-open curtain as they served champagne and elaborate cocktails to the first-class passengers. When they finally reached economy class, the service was rushed and impersonal, with only soft drinks and water available. Rachel asked for water and reclined her seat as far back as the cramped space would allow. She was beginning to doze off, exhausted from the past few weeks, when she heard footsteps approaching down the aisle. She opened her eyes to see Richard standing beside her seat, accompanied by a man in a pilot's uniform. Captain James Mitchell was 45 years old, with graying hair at the temples and piercing blue eyes that had seen a lot during his 2 decades flying commercial aircraft. But before becoming a civilian pilot, Mitchell had served 16 years in the United States Navy, including 3 years as a combat helicopter pilot, transporting SEAL teams on high-risk missions. Mitchell had left the cockpit to stretch his legs during the smooth flight. It was his routine when his co-pilot was at the controls. He liked to walk around the cabin, check if everything was all right, chat briefly with the crew. But when he passed through the first-class curtain, Richard pulled him aside. "Captain, sorry to bother you," Richard whispered, "but we had a situation earlier. A passenger with a suspicious ticket tried to occupy a seat in first class. We had to move her to economy." Mitchell frowned. "Suspect how?" Richard seemed uncomfortable for a moment. "Well, she didn't seem the type who normally flies first class. Patricia thought it might be a stolen or forged ticket." "And was it?" Mitchell asked directly. "Well, technically we didn't find anything wrong with the system, but..." "So why exactly did you move it?" Mitchell's voice had a steely tone that made Richard instinctively recoil. "Just to be safe, sir. Prevention is better than cure." Mitchell shook his head slowly, disappointed, but not surprised. He had seen this kind of discrimination before, both in the military and in civil aviation. "Show me that passenger," he ordered. Richard led him through the curtain to economy class, stopping at the last row where Rachel was sitting. She had closed her eyes again, trying to sleep despite the discomfort. The baby beside her had finally stopped crying, and she was beginning to relax when she felt someone standing next to her. "Excuse me for bothering you, ma'am." Mitchell's voice was gentle but professional. "I'm Captain Mitchell. May I speak with you for a moment?" Rachel opened her eyes, immediately on alert. Her military training had allowed her to assess the man instantly. Upright posture, precise movements, direct gaze. Military, she thought immediately. Or ex-military. "Of course," she replied, straightening up in her seat. Mitchell noticed the young woman's piercing green eyes, the kind of gaze he recognized from other combatants, a gaze that had seen things no one should see. I understand there was a mix-up with your seat earlier. Would you like to tell me your version of what happened? Rachel recounted the events objectively, without emotion, as if she were giving a mission report. Mitchell listened in silence, his expression growing increasingly serious. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. And was your ticket legitimate? Did you pay for that first-class seat? Yes, sir, Rachel replied automatically, the sir slipping from her lips before she could stop herself. I used my savings. I have the receipt in my email if you want to see it. Mitchell noticed the sir, noticed her upright posture even in the cramped seat, noticed the discipline in her responses. You served, he said. It wasn't a question. Rachel hesitated for a moment before nodding. 5 years. I just got laid off. What bouquet? Navy. Specialty? Rachel looked directly into his eyes. Ness dollars. Special naval warfare. The SEALs. Mitchell felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He'd transported dozens of SEAL teams during his time in the Navy. He'd seen what these men and women were capable of, the sacrifices they made, and now his crew had treated one of them like a common criminal. Jesus Christ, he murmured, running a hand over his face. Richard, get back in the cabin. Now. Richard left hurriedly, confused by the anger evident in the captain's voice. Mitchell knelt down to Rachel's level. Madam, on behalf of this airline and this crew, I offer my deepest apologies for the disrespectful treatment you received. It was absolutely unacceptable. Rachel blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. You don't need to. Yes, I need to. Mitchell interrupted her gently. I flew with SEALs for 3 years when I was in the Navy. I know what you do. I know what you sacrifice. And to see one of you treated like this, he shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes again, but this time for a different reason. After weeks of feeling invisible, discarded, forgotten, finally someone saw who she really was. Thank you, she whispered. Mitchell stood up and extended his hand. Come with me, please. Rachel grabbed her backpack and followed the captain down the economy class aisle. Passengers watched curiously as they passed. When they reached the curtain separating the classes, Rachel hesitated. Captain, I really don't want to cause any more trouble. You're not causing any trouble, Mitchell said firmly. You're getting the respect you should have received from the start. They boarded first class, and immediately all the passengers turned to look. Patricia was in the aisle, and her face paled when she saw the captain bringing Rachel back. The man in the Armani suit made an indignant expression. Captain, what's going on? He demanded. We thought the situation had been resolved. Mitchell stopped mid-aisle and turned to face the entire cabin. His voice, when he spoke, had the authority of someone accustomed to commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to former Navy SEAL operator Rachel Morgan, who has just returned from classified missions serving our country. She was wrongfully removed from her rightful seat in first class, based solely on her appearance. This is my plane, and I will not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Miss Morgan will be returned to her original seat, and anyone who has a problem with this may file a formal complaint. After landing, the silence that followed was absolute. The man in the Armani suit seemed to shrink in his seat. The woman covered in jewels looked down, embarrassed. Patricia was white as a sheet, clearly realizing that her career might be at stake. Mitchell guided Rachel back to seat 2A. Please, he said, gesturing toward the seat. And this time, no one will bother you. Rachel sat down, still somewhat stunned by what had just happened. Mitchell leaned in and whispered, I served on HCS 85, transporting SEAL teams mostly. Kandahar, Helmand, all those lovely places. You guys are the bravest sons of bitches I've ever met. Excuse the profanity. Rachel smiled for the first time in weeks. I've heard worse, sir. Mitchell smiled back. I bet so. When we land, I want you to come to the cabin. I'll personally ensure our customer service department handles this properly, and your first-class ticket will be fully refunded, plus a complimentary upgrade for your next trip. Captain, that's not necessary. Yes, it is, Mitchell insisted. And call me James. I stopped being captain a long time ago. Well, he added with a smile. Technically, I'm still captain, but you get the idea. After Mitchell returned to the cockpit, the atmosphere in first class had completely changed. The man in the Armani suit avoided looking in Rachel's direction. The woman covered in jewels seemed genuinely embarrassed. Some passengers who hadn't participated in the earlier humiliation looked at Rachel. with newfound respect, and some even waved politely. Patricia approached Rachel's seat, her hands visibly trembling. "Ma'am, I deeply apologize for what happened. It was a terrible error of judgment on my part." Tears filled her eyes. "I have a son who is enlisting in the Marine Corps next year, and to think that someone could treat him the way I treated you." She couldn't finish the sentence. Rachel stared at the commissioner for a long moment. Part of her was still furious, still hurt, by the humiliation. But she had also learned during her years of service that anger solved nothing, that forgiveness was often more powerful than revenge. "Thank you for the apology," Rachel said simply. "I only ask that you think twice before judging someone based solely on appearances." Patricia nodded emphatically. "I promise. And please let me know if there's anything at all I can do to improve the rest of your trip." For the remainder of the flight, Patricia treated Rachel like royalty. She brought the best meal available without Rachel having to ask, offered extra blankets and pillows, and constantly checked to see if she needed anything. Jennifer, the other flight attendant, also sincerely apologized, admitting that she had misjudged Rachel. About an hour before landing, one of the passengers, an older man with white hair and a distinguished bearing, rose from his seat and walked over to where Rachel was sitting. He extended his hand. "Miss Morgan, my name is Robert Henderson. I am a retired Army general. I wanted to personally thank you for your service." Rachel shook his hand, surprised. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor." Henderson smiled warmly. "The honor is mine. There aren't many women who get through SEAL training. You must be extraordinarily strong, both physically and mentally." "I had good instructors," Rachel replied modestly. "I'm sure it did, but instructors can only do so much. The rest comes from within." Henderson handed over a business card. "I'm working with an organization that helps veterans transition to civilian life. If you need assistance with anything, employment, housing, mental health, please don't hesitate to contact me." Rachel took the card gratefully. "Thank you, General. This means a lot." After Henderson returned to her seat, other passengers also approached. A young woman, a lawyer in New York, offered free legal advice if Rachel needed to sue the airline. A businessman mentioned that his company was always looking for veterans for security and leadership positions. An elderly couple simply wanted to shake her hand and say thank you. Not everyone approached. The man in the Armani suit remained in his seat, but Rachel noticed he couldn't look in her direction. She suspected he was deeply embarrassed, and part of her hoped this experience would make him think twice before judging people in the future. As the plane began its final descent into JFK Airport, Rachel gazed out the window at the vast expanse of New York City rising below. The city lights twinkled like earthly stars, and she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She was home, finally, truly home. The landing was smooth, and as soon as the plane stopped at the gate, Mitchell made an announcement over the loudspeaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Before you disembark, I would like to thank you all for your patience during the flight, and I would like to acknowledge the presence of someone special with us today, former Navy SEAL operator Rachel Morgan, who has just returned from serving our country under circumstances we will never fully know. Ms. Morgan, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your service and sacrifice." The entire cabin erupted in applause. Rachel felt her face flush as passengers from both classes cheered. Some stood, others waved and smiled. The baby who had been seated next to her in economy class cried again, startled by the sudden noise, but even its mother was applauding as she calmed the child. After the passengers began to disembark, Mitchell came to get her personally. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something before you go." Rachel followed him to the cockpit, where the co-pilot, a young man named David, was completing post-flight procedures. "David, this is Rachel Morgan," Mitchell introduced. "Rachel, this is my co-pilot, David Chen." David immediately stood up and extended his hand. "It's an honor, ma'am. My older brother is a Marine Raider. He told, me about working with SEAL teams in Afghanistan. You guys are legendary." "That's very kind of you," Rachel said, shaking her hand. Mitchell took something from his coat, a small silver pin with wings and an anchor. "This was mine when I flew in the Navy," he explained. "I want you to keep it, as a reminder that there are people who value what you've done, even when others can't see beyond appearances." Rachel took the pin, her hands trembling slightly. "James, I can't accept this. This is important to you, and that's exactly why I'm giving it to you," Mitchell insisted. "You deserve it, and who knows, Maybe one day you'll pass it on to another veteran who needs a reminder of their worth. Rachel held the pin tightly, feeling its weight in her palm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "For everything." Mitchell pulled her into a quick but heartfelt hug. "Keep in touch," he said. "Seriously, my email is on the back of my card. If you need anything or just want to talk to someone who understands, I'm here." As Rachel disembarked from the plane, Patricia was waiting at the door with an envelope. "This is from customer service," she explained. "Your full refund, plus vouchers for 5 complimentary first-class flights, valid for 2 years, and a formal apology letter from the airline." Rachel took the envelope, still processing everything that had happened. "Patricia, thank you. And good luck to your son. The Navy is fortunate to have him." Patricia smiled through her tears. "Thank you. And the country was lucky to have you." Rachel walked through the airport terminal, her backpack slung over her shoulder and Mitchell's pin securely in her hand. People hurried past her, each absorbed in their own worlds, oblivious to who had just passed them. And Rachel realized that it was all right. She hadn't served out of recognition or gratitude. She had served because she believed in something bigger than herself, because she wanted to make a difference, even if no one ever knew her name. But what happened on that flight had changed something inside her. Not the initial humiliation. She had faced worse and survived. It was what came after. The way Captain Mitchell had defended her. The way Patricia and others had sincerely apologized. The passengers who had offered help and support. It showed Rachel that although there were people who would judge and discriminate, there were also good people. People who valued service and sacrifice. She found her mother waiting in the arrivals area, tears streaming down her face as soon as she saw her daughter. They hugged for long minutes, saying nothing, just holding on to each other. Finally, her mother stepped back and looked at Rachel with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you all right? You look so tired." "I am," Rachel admitted, "but I'll be fine. I just need time to adjust." In the car on the way home to Long Island, Rachel told her mother about what had happened on the flight. Her mother was furious with the initial treatment, but also thrilled with how things had been resolved. "You should sue the airline," she insisted. "No," Rachel said calmly. "They admitted their mistake, genuinely apologized, and made up for more than necessary. Sometimes that's all we can ask for, that people acknowledge when they're wrong and try to do better in the future." That night, lying in her old childhood bed, surrounded by faded posters and mementos of a life that seemed to belong to someone else, Rachel looked at the pin Mitchell had given her. She thought of all the missions she had completed, all the times she had risked her life, all the nights she had slept on the cold desert floor wondering if she would see another sunrise. She thought of the comrades she had lost, good men and women who would never return home, who would never have the chance to fly first class, or sleep in their own beds, or embrace their families, and she realized that she would carry their memories forever, that their honor and their sacrifice would live on through her. Rachel also thought about the future. The days would be difficult, she knew. The transition to civilian life was never easy for combat veterans. There would be nightmares, flashbacks, difficulties connecting with people who would never fully understand what she had experienced. But there would also be good moments, moments like what had happened on that flight, when strangers became allies, when human connections proved stronger than prejudices. She picked up her phone and emailed Captain Mitchell, thanking him again and promising to keep him updated on her journey. Then she emailed General Henderson, accepting his offer of help and inquiring about transition programs for veterans. In the following days, the story of what happened on the flight began to circulate. Someone had filmed the moment Mitchell made the announcement recognizing Rachel, and the video went viral on social media. Reports appeared in local newspapers, then national ones. The airline issued a public statement praising Captain Mitchell for his leadership and renewing its commitment to treating all passengers with respect, regardless of appearance. Rachel gave a few interviews, but remained humble and focused on the bigger message, the importance of not judging people based on appearances, and the need to support veterans in their transition back to civilian life. She used her unexpected platform to highlight the difficulties many veterans faced, including homelessness, unemployment, and mental health issues. 3 months later, Rachel began working for a private security firm in New York, using her skills to protect high-level executives during international trips. The job was challenging but rewarding, and she appreciated being able to use her training in a way that didn't involve direct combat. She also began giving talks at schools and community events, sharing her story and inspiring young people, especially women, to pursue their dreams regardless of how many people said it was impossible. And every time she flew, which was frequent in her new job, she wore the pin Mitchell had given her, a silent reminder of dignity, respect, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Years later, when Rachel looked back on that fateful flight, she realized it had been a turning point not only in her own life, but in how she understood her place in the world. She had struggled for years to prove her worth in a male-dominated world, to earn respect through actions and results. But that day on the plane taught her that true respect came not only from achievements, but from character, from how one responded to injustice, from finding strength not only for oneself, but to stand up for others. And so, Rachel Morgan continued her journey, no longer as a warrior fighting on distant battlefields, but as a woman building a new life, one day at a time. She carried with her the lessons of sacrifice, honor, and hope that defined who she truly was.